Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Steve and Wholesale Investor, for allowing me to make some remarks on Australia, India. Obviously, it's a challenge to do a session just before lunch and that too under a short period of 10 minutes. And yeah, let's see how I go. I will probably skip a few slides. Yeah. So look, I got a lot of content. Obviously, if any of you want to use the slide deck, just approach me at the end. I'm trying to talk only about the broader economy and specifically about the venture capital and private markets industry. So I will be avoiding a lot of listed market data in here. So we will quickly run through economy, some of the key fiscal reforms, what exactly happening is happening on the infrastructure in India, and where is India's aspiration to be a manufacturing giant. Sustainability is a huge conversation everywhere. We had quite a few presenters this morning talking about renewable energy targets. And technology obviously has always been India's core strength. And what has India done since its core strength of being a technology country? We'll quickly touch on startups, and we'll talk about where is India heading in 2047, which is when India celebrates its 100th year of independence. And we'll talk about India-Australia partnership. Let's see what we can achieve in this short period. Look, again, I'm not going to go through the entire macro data. One data is probably important for all of you to understand today. India's per capita income is sitting about approximately $2,500 compared to China, which is sitting just around $13,000 today. So in many ways, India is going to be exactly where China was about 2 decades ago. So I'll probably leave that stat in your head, and probably another one we'll probably look at. Domestic credit in India is sitting at approximately 55% versus a world average of 148%. Okay. So, what happened in the last 75 years since India became an independent country? We have seen a 100% rise in its GDP, currently sitting at about $3.5 trillion. We have seen 500% raise in total exports. Highest ever recorded in last year, about $660 billion. Fifth largest economy in the world currently, second largest working population with an average of 29. A lot of these are very well known statistics. Most important one is how India is bouncing back since the pandemic level. It has hardly taken a dip. It's experienced a V curve, and FDI in the last 8 years has significantly doubled. So again, very quick pointers. India's growth rate is sitting at 6.8%, which is double the average of global growth rate. World over, we are approximately sitting at 3.4% versus India sitting at 6.8%. All the commodity prices in India is approximately crossed the pre-pandemic pricing, which is an important statistic to know that India is consuming, unlike most countries which are actually contracting. Every indicator that is showing on the ground, it says that India is a consuming market, and it's not going to experience recession that most people talk about. Some key fiscal reforms. I'm not going to bore you guys again here. Probably important ones to note is production-linked incentives called PLI, which is one of the most interesting incentives that Indian government has thrown to attract global manufacturers to the likes of Foxcons and Teslas and many others, who are now making a beeline to actually start setting up manufacturing facilities in India to basically manufacture in India. So there is going to be significant news around it. Semicon India mission, probably another interesting one. Let's pray that there will not be another war around Taiwan. But if that happens, there's going to be a huge issue for most of the semiconductor market globally. From that point of view, India's aspiration to become a semiconductor market is going to be an interesting story. So again, Gati Shakti plan, one of India's leading multimodal connectivity plan. It's one of the few fiscal policies which is actually connecting all forms of logistics, all forms of geospatial data available in the market. That is going to significantly change the way India commutes and India moves between the countries. Quick understanding. Obviously, there's a lot of things happens in India within a span of 12 months. Just to give you an idea, amount of money that has flown in from various parts of the world. We've picked up a few interesting stories. Zepto, equivalent to your milk run, just received $200 million. At the same time in Australia, actually, we had companies like Milk Run literally being acquired because the unit economics not stacking up. So we have a couple of interesting companies. Reliance made a huge joint venture with Brookfield Energy Partners in Australia yesterday. This is to set up a world-class manufacturing plant for producing hydrogen. So that's a huge announcement. Zoho, one of India's largest self-funded multi-billion-dollar profitable SaaS company, opened its fully owned subsidiary. India's Upgrade, India's one of the most popular edtech unicorns, acquired a Sydney-based company called Global Study Partners. So list goes on. Let's talk about infrastructure. Infrastructure is key for its growth. Where is India today and where is India heading in 2047 when India celebrates its 100 years of independence? Yeah, so it's self-explanatory. To be honest, I think probably one interesting one which I really like, which talks about urban infrastructure, is urban railways, where India is potentially experiencing 7 times growth in urban railway infrastructure, which is in urban railways within the city, metro trains equivalent. They are aspiring to build about 7,000 kilometers of railway network within the country. And aviation, another interesting one for all of us who continuously travel between the countries. By 2047, we're expecting about 1.5 billion trips to India. So huge, huge numbers. Manufacturing, this is something that most people don't associate India with. But India has been steadily growing its strength as a manufacturing giant, although no way on the same leagues of China. China is sitting at about 27% of global manufacturing. A third of global manufacturing does still happen in China, but India is steadily growing. India is contributing about 17% to the global manufacturing today. So watch out what's going to happen in the next 2 decades, as most of the world is looking for supply chain resilience programs and China plus one strategy and all of it, where we will see India potentially rising further up. Sustainability is a huge issue, and everybody talks about sustainability. Indian Prime Minister and Indian government has been primarily leading this initiative within the global south and within the developing economy quartet. Well, India is already 4th largest producer of renewable energy. India made a pledge to invest $1 trillion by 2030 to create an international solar alliance network. So India wants to raise non-fuel based energy capacity up to 500 gigawatts by 2030 and net zero emissions by 2070. Big targets. Obviously, how much of them is achievable with the size of its population is a story to be narrated, but they have made a lot of progress. If you see in this slide, so 2021, India had less than 393 gigawatts of renewable energy production, and more than 53% of energy production was coming from coal-fired power plants or fossil fuels. 2030, India is on target to produce 817 gigawatts of renewable energy, which is with more than 53% of renewable energy targets coming through non-coal-fired industry. Well, India is upgrading its technology to move from an offline cash informal low productivity economy to an online cashless formal high productive economy. Okay, 1.3 billion people completely identified. I'm not going to talk about it. It's one of the biggest revolutions in the world. Every one of us have a unique identity number. Second largest consumer of smartphones. Number 1 in the world in fintech adoption today. Last calendar year, India had 74 billion digital transactions with a GMV of just over $1.6 trillion. Okay, I'm going to skip this line. Okay, just one quick example of what happens when government participates for uplifting the poor and bringing more people into technology adoption. So since the big biometric adoption that Indian government has set up, where India has developed the core technology stack, more digital transactions have been happening in India than ever before. And if you combine that with the raising infrastructure on producing cheap data, so India is now one of the cheapest data provider in the world. India can give you 1 GB of data for about 17 cents versus Australia actually cost you about 57 cents per GB. So just to put things into perspective, and India moved from consuming 30 GB of data, 2 GB of data per month to 30 GB per data per month today, per consumer. Significant revolution. Obviously, I'm not going to again explain how this all happened. So all of us know India started as an IT services economy from with the level of technology stack that government has built. It has moved from an IT services provider to a significant digital identity stack it has built for himself, and with the combination of available cheap smartphones and cheap data, India has built a strong startup economy that led to formalization of many jobs and many and organizing many workforce across the market. That led to significant visibility for the government to collect taxes, both in formal and informal way at a personal tax level, and GST implementation. That led for financial inclusion, and that led for significant access for higher credit instruments for SME sector in the market. And that's how India is going to achieve its 10 trillion aspiration. 180 companies out of the Fortune 500 companies does have their global R&D centers in India already. So it's a known statistic. Again, 86,000 startups registered, 108 unicorns, 900,000 jobs, combined valuation of 350 billion. Pretty self-explanatory. Well, big numbers, isn't it? So AgTech, 684% growth in the last 8 years. EdTech, 143% growth. FinTech, 47 times. Enterprise Tech, 20 times. Health Tech, 15 times. Doesn't matter where you invest, you will make money. Doesn't matter which sector you go after, you will make money. That's what it says. India is no different to the rest of the market. India has contracted 0.7%. The venture capital industry in India has contracted about 0.7% in correlation with the global contraction. If you see globally, venture capital sector is approximately contracted about 0.7%. Well, again, rest of them is pretty self-explanatory. So high growth sectors in 2023 to watch out is been EdTech, FinTech, mobility, autonomy, and healthcare. And few other sectors to watch out is around human resources, supply chain, and food tech. If these are some of the sectors that, if any of you are interested, you must be looking at India quite seriously. Again, I'm going to skip some of these. What is India trying to achieve by 2047? India wants to be $32 trillion economy and being the second largest economy in the next by 2047. India will get to a 10 times per capita income from wherever it is today. An average Indian will make about $20,000 by 2047. It's an interesting stat for me. Foreign direct investments will potentially grow by 12 times to approximately about 1 trillion US. So where is Indian startup sector going to head in the next 7 to 8 years? Approximately, we believe India there will be an additional $300 billion that will flow into India in the next 8 years. By 2030, some of the statistics are quite interesting. For example, India is potentially going to see approximately 750 family offices being created, more than 15,000 angel investors, and say 100 plus government entities which will play an active role as an investor. More than 1,000 corporate VCs will play up in India, and more than 450 accelerators and incubators are going to be coming up in the next 8 years. Well, where is Australia, India? Always an interesting story. We got to bring the story back to where we are. So, look, quick introduction to what we did. We run a combination of products, foreign exchange, corporate, and working capital. In the last 10 years that we've been around, we moved about $1.5 billion worth of money across 37,000 suppliers, representing 1,100 of our customers in the last 10 years. We were involved in more than $200 million worth of corporate finance / corporate strategy work across these markets. We have we built over $25 million of working capital instruments for our clients. We did make some proprietary investment in a few interesting companies, and most interesting ones that we made in this year as our joint venture partners, Olympia and Simply Biz. Olympia is a listed company in India, which is one of the largest listed company which distributes consumer brands from various parts of the world into India. The likes of Sunrise, Capilano Honey, Body Shop, and many other Australian products are being distributed to India through Olympia. And we have made a joint venture with them to help Australian brands to access Indian markets. Some Australian startups which you may be familiar. So Australia is probably still fairly new compared to where the rest of the world is as far as embracing India, but it's definitely catching up. Almost there is a wide representation of all major tech-enabled startups from Australia starting to take India quite seriously, although it may not have been seen in the market, but it's definitely an undercurrent that we are observing. So, quick statistics: trade contributes to 40% of Australia's GDP. More importantly, in this slide that I want to make an observation is how the trade dynamics changing between Australia, China, and Australia and India. Australia, China year-on-year growth is about 7%, and Australia, India year-on-year growth is 71%. So that is an interesting static that you got observed. The 29th of December, Australia and India has signed a free trade agreement, and since the free trade agreement being executed, within a short span of 8 months, Australia has traded an additional $25 billion with India that it never did before. So Australia and India is sitting at approximately $46 billion today. I'll skip this slide, but quickly pointing out top Indian exports to Australia: petroleum products, drug formulations, and biologicals, in addition to tech, which all of us know. Major Indian imports from Australia includes coal and education sector and a bunch of others, mainly minerals at the moment. But I think that will change significantly if you've noticed the number of Australian startups representing themselves in India. Indian consumer, this is probably an important slide, primarily because what is happening on back of the venture capital sector being a huge homegrown advantage for Indian startups. It has been creating significant wealth for Indian employees who's working for startups. So if you look at example, in 2022, we saw about $2.25 billion worth of value being transferred from the employee that's being created for the employees, with these startups exiting either through IPOs or trade sales, or potentially these startups being profitable and potentially offering them employee share option buybacks. So I think I'm being called to step down, so I'll probably skip some of these slides. Look, I think this is probably one slide, quick attention. India is moving from women empowerment to women-led development. It's got highest number of women commercial pilots in the world. 55% growth in women CEOs and MDs in the corporate sectors in the last 5 years. Most important one, it's about bringing gender parity into equation. Look, I had a little song to give you guys a little bit of set the mood as you get to the lunch. If the organizers allow us to play that, we will play. Otherwise, we'll skip it. Well, when we talk about India, it's all about celebration. So we've got to have song and dance.
गगन के छोर भारत ने भरी उड़ान है, अब आत्मनिर्भर भारत से दूर ना आसमान है। प्रगति और विकास का आनंदोत्सव है, आजादी का अमृत महोत्सव है, ये महोत्सव है। नए भारत के निर्माण का, बलिदानों के सम्मान का, महिलाओं के उत्थान का, अब सर्व के कल्याण का, जन जन का उत्सव है, हर मन का उत्सव है, ये महोत्सव है, ये अमृत महोत्सव है। हर कदम आगे बढ़ाना है, एक नया सूरज उगाना है, हमने मन में ठाना है, स्वर्ग धरती पर ही बनाना है, नए संकल्पों का अवसर है, भारत माँ को नमन सौ सौ है। जन जन का उत्सव है, हर मन का उत्सव है, ये महोत्सव है, ये महोत्सव है, ये महोत्सव है, ये महोत्सव है, ये अमृत महोत्सव है।